Hi there, good evening. This is Lana. I live in Clearwater, Florida, and I just wanted to say thank you for this amazing community where we get to share, stop these vaccinations. And it kind of brings up a little bit of emotion for me. I was in the Air Force for over 10 years, and I followed the rules a lot when I was growing up, and I thought I was doing the right things. And when I went to the doctor, even when I was sick, I was very trusting of medical doctors and professionals, or so-called professionals. And so I would go along with whatever they told me because I thought their interest was having my health in their best interest, right? And it didn't sink in right away. In fact, I've been over-medicated. I've taken all sorts of drugs over the course of the years that were prescribed to me, not realizing how much damage they were doing onto my body and how much harm it inflicted and how much healing I would have to go through as a result. So during my time in the military, we have these vaccination cards and always having to get everything done every year and having to make sure that we had particular vaccinations done. Like, how about the flu shot? I never even questioned it. I always stood in line, and my mom used to say she was a good doobie. Like, do y'all remember that TV show for kids? Are you a good doobie? And I was a good doobie. I did what I was supposed to do or what I was told to do. And so going into the military, I was like, well, you're supposed to do everything. Wow, anthrax. Now that is one I was very grateful I did not have, but I had plenty of people around me that when they were starting to say it was going to be mandatory, I started to get nervous. I really did, because people around me were getting seriously sick. And if I recall, wasn't that like a 5-series shot? Like when they were first doing it, it was a series of you had to have something like 5, and it was, I for some reason 5 rings in my mind. I don't recall. But, like with the flu shot, inevitably every single year when I would get it, I'd still get the flu. So I never felt like, I was getting anything that was beneficial for me if I still had to have it every year and still got sick. I mean, does that make sense? Oh, it's normal. You're going to be vaccinated so you don't get it, but yet you still get it. The craziness, right? And a lot of us, we don't know better until we know better. But when we do know better, we try to do better. That's usually how we try to, make up for the fact that, wow, I didn't have all the information at my disposal. And I think it's really beneficial that we become as informed as we possibly can, right? So, over the course of my career, they were really good about prescribing Motrin as an anti-inflammatory, as a way to, you have a pain here, you have a pain there. Here's some. We used to call it vitamin M, Motrin, ibuprofen, right? And they had up to 1,600 milligrams. I'll never forget that. But I later learned about, that stuff's really bad for your liver, right? And so the last thing you need, and most people have all sorts of issues to begin with if they're living and eating the SAD diet, your healthy immune system or lack thereof as a result of whatever you're putting into your body on top of that. And so these vaccinations are just weakening the immune system that much more. And of course, we all know heavy metals, right? We need more of that in our systems. We've got we're being force medicated with fluoride in our water. I mean, come on. Detroit, have they even cleaned up their water? The pipeline, let's not even go there. I mean, they're contaminating us in all ways, shapes, and forms, and I find it to be sickening, and it bugs me. It really bugs me, and I'm very grateful that there are forums like this where we can come together and share the information we've gleaned, because I think it's crazy for anybody who has been conditioned and brainwashed to believe that, oh, your child needs to be vaccinated because it's going to make my vaccinated child sick. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. If your child's vaccinated, your child should be the one who is supposedly protected, right? And so, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, I would be more concerned about that child that is vaccinated. And so, like, for example, when they started coming out with this vaccination for the young children to the Gardasil, that one there makes me the maddest, because you have healthy, thriving young adults that haven't even started, and they're trying to give it to kids who aren't even having sex, and they're claiming it's to prevent STDs. I'm sorry, that's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That you're trying to force one more shot, one more thing down our throats. And you're trying to do it for the sake of money in your pocket, because they're not even asking for permission a lot of times. They're just going behind parents' backs and doing it without permission. And it's crippling, it's killing, it's debilitating a lot of these young adults. And I can't even imagine what that is like. And that's the kind of thing that does actually enrage me and makes me sad. And reading those stories, or hearing those stories, or seeing the deaths as a result of it, it's not worth it. I personally believe in a holistic way of living, eating a whole foods, plant-based diet, living a lifestyle of, clean eating, clean living, breathing, exposure, choosing a healthy environment. I think most of our stuff really originates in our head. I think we all have something we have to work on. And that we should all be supportive of one another's choices. Now, of course, I don't want to inflict my choices upon anyone else, and I truly honor what someone else wants to do, but I also don't believe that anybody should try to force what they want to do on me. So, on the one hand, yes, I have a strong opinion, but that's for my choices, and I think that's important, that we all stand in a place of, okay, this is my life, and I choose what I'm going to do. I'm not going to choose for another, because that's not going to help me. I only have control of my life and what's going on in my area, right? My family, not what's going on in someone else's. Though of course, I wish the best, that we all make the best choices for ourselves. That's really the bottom line, because we all have to kind of navigate our own journey in life and have our own experiences, and nobody could ever know what someone else's life has ever been, and so what dictates all the choices that they make from that point on. And so it's a fine line, but I honestly believe the government shouldn't be the ones to mandate what we do or don't do. How we're medicated through the tap water, I think that one right there, that should be a choice, because it's plenty more than what the so-called recommended allowance of what they claim we should get for fluoride, which isn't even real fluoride. It's not organic. It's a byproduct, right? Gypsum, right? So during my Air Force career, backing up, I was stationed in Korea, and during a period, they claimed I was exposed to tuberculosis. And so when I went to go, I was supposed to be stationed in Belgium, I went to have the TB testing where they prick you, and you come back in like a couple days and they check the spot. And I'd had that before, and it had never been positive or anything. And in fact, when they did it and I looked down, I'm like, it's kind of not really positive. It's a little bumpy, but not really. But, again, it's one of those things where you're sitting there going, well, okay. They send you for x-rays, chest x-rays. And again, I always listened to at that time I didn't, I was a little upset, but they proceeded to tell me that, it's positive. So they had the chest x-rays. But at the same time, the woman did agree with me when I said, well, it doesn't look that bad. It was kind of on that borderline. So I went and had the chest x-rays done, and this was when I was stationed up at Fort Meade, Maryland. When I had the chest x-rays done, they said, you're completely clear, you're good. But we're going to put you on INH anyway. And INH is, it's basically like chemotherapy. It's a pill form. Man, that stuff got me so sick. And I think I was on it for 6 months. And I became extremely jaundiced. I remember my body became more inflamed. I know I put on weight. I was unhappy. I felt horrible. I honestly went into a depression, which makes me a little sad, because when I remember this and I think about it, it was kind of it was a difficult time. And I remember I just kept feeling so sick to my stomach. This stuff made me nauseous, and I was not feeling good. I mean, for 6 months of feeling like crap. And of course they told you weren't supposed to drink alcohol with it when you took it and all this other stuff, which, try to tell somebody that when they're in their 20s and they're living in Europe. I was stationed in Belgium and trying to enjoy life, and I already felt crappy, and I was trying to enjoy the company of my friends and go out and do things, and here I've got 6 months of this medication that is destroying my liver, I learned later. But yet the VA doesn't want to recognize that as having caused me any problems. And for years I've been working on healing my gut, healing my body. I had been diagnosed before I got out of the military with IBS. And when you already have digestive issues, and then you've got this chemotherapy in your body, and you've got your liver is just, and your yellow eyes and jaundicing, skin, and it wasn't a fun time for me. And this is one of the reasons I don't agree with all these medications that they push on us. So yeah, it kind of humbles me when I think back to that, because I had almost forgotten about it before I was actually coming on here tonight. And I just wanted to introduce myself and say thank you to each and every one of you who shares information and spreads awareness, because, I know it's really easy for us to get caught up in what we're told and think that, oh, well, we're being told the truth, and now we're learning the truth that they've been telling us isn't quite the 100% truth of what really is going on behind the scenes. We keep finding out things, and we're being more informed now. We have technology at our fingertips, and we can do the research and learn more and more and more than we ever could in the past. Instead of being told something and just going by word, now we can actually go and seek the information, and it's available, right? Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate you, Deborah. Thank you. And military gets real. Anthrax shots, exposure to Agent Orange, working in facilities where we were asbestos. And when I was in Omaha, Nebraska, my first assignment, just to get to my office space, I remember going through this old building, and here they had just plastic surrounding this area, and a man up there who was removing asbestos. Oh, you just had to walk around it. It was just a small little area. And it's all up in the air, even though there's this plastic around it. It wasn't that that well protected. So the buildings had plenty of asbestos. It's these little things where you go, wow, and that was in my office space, right? And they don't want, the Veterans Administration, unfortunately, still has a lot of work to do in catching up and taking care of its people. Besides the fact that if you submit a claim, in case none of you out there as a veteran knows even anything about this, but when you submit claims for your health and veterans disability, they like to deny you first. You have to fight. You have to keep rebuttaling. You have to appeal constantly. And I actually have been doing this for years. I got out in 2003. It's 2017, and I'm still waiting on a response from, I think it's my third appeal. From everything from the IBS and the exposure to different foods that I was eating, the chronic migraines. I have degeneration in my neck, my mid back, my thoracic back. I spend a lot of time sitting in a chair, constantly at a computer. My right hip, they want to do surgery. Not really crazy about going under the knife for that one. And even when I was stationed in Korea, for example, and I twisted my ankle or stepped off a curb wrong because I was covered in full field gear and carrying chem bags and all this other craziness, and you got to carry an M16 around with you because you're what they call exercising. All these shots and all these things they have you doing that nobody ever questions because you've been told to do it. You never question authority. And that's the unfortunate thing as we're doing these things. And then they turn around and they deny you what you've done and proceed to, just go away. Just go away, And most people, they don't have the strength of will, their courage to appeal because they don't know that they have that option. A lot of times what they do, oh my God, the Wi-Fi behind me Yes, EMFs, electromagnetic fields. Yeah, exactly, Austin. Exactly. In fact, I worked with many people who worked in SATCOM, satellite communications, or in the Wi-Fi arena, and not talking about this, the microwaves. That in itself, the exposure to that, and I was around a lot of that. Even when I was stationed in Korea, I had to walk everywhere because we didn't have cars. It was a 1-year tour. They called it a remote assignment. And so the exposure to different things there was crazy. You know, you don't know what you were exposed to half the places. Yeah, the guys would tell me. I was having a conversation not even that long ago, say about 4.5 years ago, with a man who worked in those satellite environments and the microwaves, and he was saying how the radar sites, okay? I was at a radar site when I was stationed in Belgium, and how being exposed to the microwave frequencies, there were a lot of men who were sterile, or if they had children, there were birth defects. There was a lot going on there, and that people don't know about it, and you don't know when you're doing it. You just go about doing it. How about police officers? Nowadays, they've got so much technology. The stuff that's in their cars. It's not like it used to be. Even then, those radar guns, the original ones that they started, those are really powerful, right? Those cause some serious issues. There's so much out there. I mean, but most people just take it for granted and they kind of brush it off. They don't realize the harm. Or we just go through life, la la la, just not even thinking about it. Yeah, and actually I do. I have a lot of, I have Orgonite, and I do a lot of cleansing myself because of I had mercury fillings. There's another story. So while I was in the Air Force, and I had already had all of my mercury fillings replaced before I went in the military. I only had like 2 fillings when I was in school when I was younger. Too much sugar, right? And then I go in the Air Force, and they go and take out some cavities or something, and it turns out they were still using amalgam. They were still using mercury fillings. And so I had metal in my mouth coming out of the military when I went in without it, because 2, like my other fillings, I think they had to redo or something. So I had something like 4 fillings that were mercury. And that in itself, it gets stuck in all of your organs, right? They took out my wisdom teeth. You know, they like to experiment on us soldiers. They really do. And they still are. Are you serious? Are they still using mercury in the military? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So in December of 2009, I had mine removed, and I had a resin replacement. And I'm going to tell you, first off, they tell you have to detoxify, you have to do a cleansing. I think I was on it for 3 weeks prior to having them redone. And then as a result, within a month, less than a month, I learned that I was allergic to wheat and gluten, because what happens is you become hypersensitive. Your body's much more attuned and more aware. Like all of a sudden it starts like telling you all the things that are wrong. And so here I had just made up all this food. I made up some like carrot cake and some carrot bread with wheat flour. And the next morning, and my dad made a pizza. The next morning I woke up, it was a Saturday morning, I woke up itching, I had a rash across my abdomen, I was constipated and bloated, I was in so much pain, and then I'm itching on top of all that. And I never had this reaction before that. And so here I am in 2010, I remember it was the first weekend in February, and I'm itching like all in the crevices, anywhere there was a crease, right? Scratching here, especially around here. This is the big one in the rash, right? So your food goes through, and like this is the first place it responds. And I noticed that over the years, if I've ever had food contamination from wheat or gluten, this is the first area I see rash. It's also why I avoid soy in all those other foods, because there's so much heavy metal content in a lot of the genetically modified foods. Staying away from the high fructose corn syrups and all these other things is what I do as well. It's actually one of the things that really led me in the direction of whole foods, plant-based living. I don't like to say I'm vegan. I think that's a little too, that's put you in a box, label, right? So, yeah, so I have this reaction. It's Saturday morning and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, just don't itch it, it'll go away. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it'll go away. It won't last very long. I mean, I was really good during the entire time I was in the military that I would try to stave off and stay away from taking medications if I could help it. Stay away from, like, I have a high threshold for pain. And so I just would go, I'll get through this. I'll be fine. I would power through. I would push myself when I probably shouldn't have been a lot of times. And so as a result, thank you. As a result, on the Sunday morning, I mean, I was doing okay, but on the Sunday morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, I could no longer stand it. I was just losing my mind, waking up itching, and I'm like, I have got to find a pharmacy, and I have to find some Benadryl. And I didn't even want to take any medications. At that point in my life, I was like, after the mercury and everything else, I was trying to stay as clean as possible. And I hadn't really changed my eating yet, but I was aware something wasn't right. So I did a lot of research, and while I was online, I learned, oh my gosh, it's got to be the wheat. It's got to be the gluten, because everything pointed to it. And it was that Friday, I knew everything I put in my body, and I had never considered it. I had never considered that for years, being doubled over in pain was a symptom of my allergies to this particular food, that gluten and wheat could be doing this to me. And so here I would be, my first year in the military, and I was in a TS environment where I had to wait for my clearance and I had to be escorted to the bathroom, and I literally was doubled over in pain. My side was cramping so bad I couldn't breathe, I couldn't stand up, it hurt to move. And it was like, I was sitting at my desk and I remember saying, I gotta use the bathroom, but I can't get up right now. And they're like, everybody around me is like, are you okay? And I'm like, no. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe if I go to the bathroom. And then I'm constipated, so nothing's coming out. And I'm just stuck in this holding pattern of sheer, utter pain, of sharp, like, please, just put a knife in me because it would have felt better. So I'm like walking down the hallway, like, and I mean doubled over, hunched over. And that wasn't the first time. I suffered that a lot for a long time. And so, yeah, I did this research and I learned, oh my gosh, the only thing this could be is the gluten. And it started to, it was almost like dots were connecting for me. And on the Monday I learned this other thing, apparently back then, this was in 2010, it's now 7.5 years later, and I'm not 100% sure if they've changed up and they have new ways of testing, but I know they can do supposedly a blood work up on you. But the problem is that you have to still be consuming it. And what I did learn is you're supposed to go in and cut a piece of the duodenum, and then they can test it while you're still consuming it. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a pretty invasive way of finding out. Well, as a result of all my research, I immediately was thinking, okay, Monday can't come soon enough to get to my VA doctor. And so on Sunday morning, I'm waking up and I'm going around to, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to all of these places just looking for Benadryl. And again, at this time, I'm like reading all my labels and thinking, okay, I need something that's going to be quick and effective and not a bunch of high fructose corn syrup, because it's in all sorts of stuff. So I pick up a bottle of the liquid Benadryl thinking I'm okay. And I swore I read it. I thought I read it, but I was so desperate and in such a frantic state and feeling so, all this discomfort. It wasn't until after I got in my car and had already taken a swig that I looked down and I'm like, high fructose corn syrup and red dye. I'm like, how did I get that? How did that slip by? I spent a good amount of time reading everything in there. In the end, I ended up finding that the best thing I could utilize were these small gel caps, and it was the one with the least amount of anything that would cause me any issues. And then on Monday morning, I went into my doctor and I expressed to her, okay, so this is what I'm experiencing. And this is what I learned when I was looking online. And she said, well, we'll do up the blood work. I don't think it's a food allergy. She said, but we'll find out and you'll be fine. And I said, well, what I read said that I still had to be consuming it, and I'm not consuming it anymore since Friday. And she's like, who's the doctor here? You're still symptomatic and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, ooh. And at that moment, it really, really set home for me. I realized, oh my gosh, I need to take my life back. And when I took back my life that moment, I realized, okay, this isn't an argument with the doctor. I could see that she wasn't being receptive to what I was telling her, but I was also learning that she doesn't live in this body 24/7. I have to make choices that are healthy for me. I understand she's got a whole lot of training, but she can only truly know it from her own personal experience and not know it from mine. And yes, of course, the doctor's going to have supposedly a wealth of information, but if it's not them, they're not going to know what you're experiencing. And so that's where we really need to become our own health advocates and take back our life. And that's why these forums are phenomenal, because you can learn so much more that can aid you in better choices and making decisions for your friends and your family or whoever you may be a caretaker for as well, right? And so test comes back, it's negative, and I'm like, you know what? At that point, I already knew. I knew for myself because I knew what I experienced. I knew what I ate because I'm the one who made it. And that was when I chose. I'm taking back my life. I don't need to agree with her. I don't need to argue with her. I don't have to explain myself, right? I just know that I live in this body 24/7, and I need to start tapping into it and listening to it more. That was huge for me. And so that was 7.5 years ago, February of 2010. And I'm so grateful for that, because I think that was my wake-up call. That was a huge eye-opener. And when you know better, you do better. And I didn't, I had a lot of my friends were like, oh, you should go vegan and da-da-da. Well, I'm going to tell you that I'm an original meat eater. I'm an O positive. I could tell you that, I got to have my steak, my filet mignon, my real butter. But eventually what I started doing is having to trace my food back to source. And I started thinking, well, if I'm allergic to something and an animal's eating what I am allergic to, then it's going to pass it on to me, just like secondhand smoke, right? That was how I equated it. And when I started doing so much more research, for me, I was like, wow, I really need to be careful, because I don't know what's being passed on to me. So I really just kind of learned a lot more about nutrition for myself and my own health. And I just started applying it in my life and navigating what worked and what didn't work. I started doing a whole lot of smoothies. I burnt out 2 blenders. They weren't the best. They were just those glass Osters. And eventually I said, okay, my dad's like, okay, you burnt out 2 motors. So I got myself a Blendtec, and I love my Blendtec. I use that like crazy. And since then, life has been a whole new world opened up for me, because I love food. I always have. But here I am in an environment now that the food that I'm preparing, I get to craft from a new perspective. I get to play with new recipes and create. Just for me, it's exciting, because it's like the palette, right? Like an artist palette, there's so many different colors. There's so many variations and flavors. Just like on the tongue, you're going to feel all these different flavors. So, but going back to the military too, I also had issues with UTIs in my late teens, like 19, 20. I had a lot of urinary tract infections. And that in itself, like kidney infections and stuff, like the year that I was stationed in Korea, that's another one. So I'd be doubled over in pain from these kidney infections that were so bad. And they were putting me on medication like, I don't remember, I can't remember all the names of all this stuff. But it was so powerfully strong. And I remember having a reaction. That's when I learned I was allergic to sulfa drugs as well, because I had a sinus infection, and then I also had a kidney infection, or a UTI at the time. And it was so severe. Again, the military likes to make you suffer. And I had to go to what they called sick call every day for a week. And it was again, one of those experiences where I was like, I could barely move. I had a fever. I felt miserable. And now again, I have a high threshold for pain. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, what I experienced then. It was miserable. And I don't know how they can get away with it. They kept saying, well, you need to come back tomorrow. You need to come back tomorrow. They would only give me 24-hour quarters, when they can actually give you up to 3 days. But for some reason with me, they just only wanted to give me a day. And it was so bad at twice they had to give me IV fluids. And that was not the first time in that 1 year period I was in the doctor's office for something so severe like that. And I don't even remember half the stuff they gave me. And then when I was stationed at my next duty station after that, once again, I was experiencing UTIs and kidney infections. Well, it wasn't until years later I learned something, and I don't know if anybody has ever heard about this, but I don't eat chicken. I wouldn't eat chicken again anyway, but I don't eat meat now. But I learned that the chicken can carry a virus, that you don't even have to consume it. But if you're in the presence of it, you can have this virus passed on to you. And it doesn't need to be alive. It could be a prepared or unprepared chicken in your environment. Like, you could just be exposed to it. And that's kind of scary stuff. It's not E. coli either. I can't remember the name. You just look up, Dr. Geiger, I think, did some write-up that was really, really good. I know he had a video on it, and he does short clips. But if you look up, just Google it. It's something like chicken virus, look up urinary tract infection or UTI, right? And so I was just fascinated. And you know what? He came out with that recently. I watched it, and it fascinated me because I was like, I found that years ago. I found an article about that years ago that just really opened my eyes. And I had stopped eating chicken long before that, because when the bird flu came out, I wasn't touching chicken anymore. And the bird flu was prevalent in the States and also in Europe during that time. And there was so much controversy. And do you remember the hoof and mouth with the meat? Scary stuff. I'm surprised I ate meat as long as I did just based on that stuff. And I lived in Belgium, and I had been to the UK and all these crazy places that all this stuff was, I could have been exposed to, and I didn't know. And so, yeah, that was an interesting ordeal. But the doctor I went to, when I asked him about, I keep having UTIs, I keep having kidney infections. Do you know what his response to me was? Oh, you're a woman. This is normal for a woman in your 20s for your age. The stuff that they pass on isn't even knowledge or wisdom. It's like a sweep it off to the side. It's not beneficial. Instead of saying, I really don't know, which is taking personal responsibility and at least owning that you don't know. Well, it could be anything. It's normal for your age. I didn't feel real confident with that. I didn't feel at all happy with that, and I felt like it was an insult to my intelligence. And so, yeah, and it was like that for a while for me. But eventually, yes, it cleared up, and I didn't have any more problems. But during the course of my career, all the shots that they make you take, who knows what else I might have been exposed to. It's crazy. And that's why I'm like really grateful for forums and people and sharing information, because sharing is caring, and I'm all about spreading the love. And so, yeah, the more I can learn, the better. And I hate, that's what I really appreciate, is just scrolling through and seeing what it is everyone's sharing here. And that's just so beautiful, because it gives us more information to make informed choices to living a more empowered life. The more information we have, the more we can actually live and thrive, as opposed to surviving, right? That's not normal. We're not supposed to just survive. We're supposed to thrive, right? So we should be exposed to a more healthy environment, one that's supportive in living a life that doesn't, have to fight against something or be pushing against the grain, or like go along to get along. Some of those old paradigms, like my father's generation. Oh, it's the way we've always done it, so it's the way it's always going to be. No, I think we need to change that. Definitely changing the course of history for the better now, and I'm very grateful for that. And you know what? The more of us, the better. The more of us who are willing to step up and understand and see that and support one another for their choices, whatever it is. We should all have our own choice, because we all have our own innate power. It's just the idea that all of these, agencies and controlling governments, they want to force it themselves in such a way that it gives the appearance of having power over us, right? I tell you what, living abroad really opened my eyes, because even like in Europe, the Europeans will have told me, you know, oh, in America, you all don't even take care of your own people. And I think it's important for, especially here in the US, that people do support one another instead of fight and compete and think we need to impose ourselves. I think the culture has perpetuated this idea that, number one, we need to police one another. You're supposed to do it because I have to do it, right? I don't live in the DC area for that reason anymore, because I swear it felt like Big Brother's watching, so everybody's watching everybody else because they all feel like, you know, they're being attacked. It's an interesting energy, and it just felt very stuffy and heavy for me. So that's just my experience. But yeah, again, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for where we're at in our history right now, because there's a lot of scary stuff happening. It's interesting that all this information is coming out, and then you have holistic doctors that are dropping like flies. I can't even watch the news because of this. It's saddening. It's sickening. It's just ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's not even ridiculous. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. Yeah. So I think I'm winding down. If anybody out there has information to share, I'm looking forward to reading about it. And I want to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to introduce myself and my experiences. And also, all of you, thank you, because the information you share is valuable, and it gives each other, you know, empowered choices and information to live a better life, right? So I hope to serve in whatever capacity I can, and hopefully I can, maybe if I have some great information, I can do this again, and also I'm looking forward to all of what you all have to share. So just have an amazing night, an amazing life. You're all amazing anyway, just because you're smart enough to take it to that level of just going down the rabbit hole, even though, you know, once you go down, you can't come out of it, right? It seems like once you find one thing, it just keeps, it's like that trail, you just can't stop following it. So have an amazing evening. Spread the love as far as keep on sharing that information. I really appreciate this time. Good evening. Thank you. Bye. Be well.